Today I have with me Rahul Chitut. He's a dear friend of mine. He has been in the marketing domain for nearly 15 years now. Started from the B2C space and now in a B2B domain. So interesting to have his viewpoint on how the movement works and how the market changes from B2C to B2B. So let's get him
Hello,
on board.
Akshay.
Hi
How are
Rahul.
you?
I'm good, man. Good to have a chat with you on on a podcast. I think our friendship goes back a long time, but this is first time we're talking on a very
Yeah, I know.
professional
And I
way.
think we've been thinking of doing this since a while, and finally we've been able to sort of go ahead with it. So that's fantastic. And looking forward to a great discussion.
Yeah, same here. So the obvious question now, you have moved from the B2C domain and now you are in the B2B sphere of marketing. So what is the difference you see? What is the major change which you see in both the approach and how people perceive it? So if we can break it down, I think we can just start with what do you see as the biggest difference and then we
Definitely.
can break it down.
Well, from a broader perspective, when you see it, you feel that there's a big difference between how B2C products are marketed versus how B2B marketing is done and everything. But as you get closer to it, as you sort of venture deeper into it, you feel that there is not much of a difference except for the fact that the audience that you're speaking to is a little different. Otherwise, from a communication perspective, but from a media perspective, from a targeting perspective and all, or activations that you do are pretty much in line. At a broader level, what happens is, when you talk about B2C communication, it's more targeted to a mass base. So the communication can be a little more, I would say, frivolous, or little more, you can take a little more liberty in terms of how you want to sort of craft it, how you want to sort of direct it. But with B2B, what happens is the buyer personas and the targetings are defined in a very preset manner. So you have numbers are not huge, they are very specific. And the language, the communication that you do needs to be very, very targeted, very specific to those audience sets. So that is one major difference which I've seen over a period of time. I think second thing which comes to my mind is the fact that when you talk about B2B marketing, a lot of it, there is the classic inbound outbound marketing which we do as marketers. But the second thing is, how do you sort of target your communication when you're doing any white papers or any specific blogs or podcasts, because it is not going to reach out to a mass base. It's not going to reach out to maybe lakhs or crores of people, but only a few thousand who are going to implement your product and sort of reach out to various target groups. So that's a big differentiator which person needs to have in mind when he's sort of trying to figure out communication or marketing or targeting that he has to do. So yeah, so these are things which you sort of initially feel when it comes to B2B and B2C marketing. But like I said, I think when you get into it, it's pretty much similar in terms of how you want to craft your communication or do the media, or so on and so forth. So yeah.
Yeah, so what I understand from this is that major difference being the scale, like the number of audiences to be reached, right? I think that becomes the biggest
Yeah.
differentiator at the front of it. The other thing I think, and one interesting point which I want to touch upon in the beginning itself is that B2B marketing is generally considered boring. Like it's considered boring, and B2C marketing is everyone's like poster boy. Everyone loves the B2C
Yeah.
marketing domain. So when you see that, and when you kind of look at that from a lens of a
Hmm.
marketing career, right? How does that play? Like, does is it really that the B2C is that glamorous career to be in, or B2B offers a good opportunity? So
No,
where
no,
is the
you've touched
opportunity
upon a
really?
very sort of a delicate point, and something which I think we also used to discuss when we were doing our MBA, that B2C karna hai, and we want to do FMCG because FMCG was big back then. So want to get into FMCG, do B2C, do big campaigns, outdoor and TV and blah 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 and whatever. And that's a fair understanding of a person, of what marketing is. Even we had that, no questions, no doubts about it. Uh, but what happens is, while that I wouldn't say it is the glamorous side of it, but it has a larger scale. Like, just I'm going back to that earlier point, it has a scale. That's why people feel, it has so many things that you can do, so much of depth and all. But when you talk about B2B, while on the outside people might feel it's very boring or very sort of passe, in terms of the work that you're doing, uh, you are in fact maybe reaching out to more buyer personas or more target groups via that. Because say I'm talking about insurance product that we used to sell. So while we were while our B2B product was basically targeting e-commerce websites or traditional sort of comparison websites and all, the differentiators were quite a lot. So I'll just sort of talk in depth here. We were selling a e-commerce product, sorry, we were selling an insurance product which was basically a embedded insurance. So the product was basically selling bike insurance or mobile insurance, electronics insurance to various users. So at the front of it, it is going to B2C consumers only. But our idea was not to do a direct B2C sort of sell. It was to tie up with various companies, become an embedded insurer, and then via them sell to various target groups. So what happened here was our first sort of hanging fruit here was comparison websites, where you can sort of go and plug in your product when people are comparing bikes or comparing electronics or mobiles or whatever. The next one was more of your e-commerce products, where the sell is happening. So a person is buying a mobile phone and you plug in the mobile insurance there, or a bike, and so on and so forth. The next one was your electronic stores. So in India you have Chroma, right, and so on and so forth. So I'm here, the context is more European, but I'm just giving an example. So that was the third sort of target group. The fourth one was via, so basically the idea was where I was sort of targeting close to about 4 to 5 different target groups of people to sell my product to, and these were all B2B people who were then selling to different
Yeah.
different audiences in different. So that's the interesting part here, is how are you approaching these 5 target groups specifically? Can I reach out to one target group via content marketing? Can the other one be reached out to via sort of LinkedIn marketing? So I put some money on LinkedIn, and then sort of the outreach happens to them via that. Third group can be done via PR or trade marketing efforts and all. So on the outset it looks very boring.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it's very bland, क्या करना है, एक communication को ही तुमको reach करना है, but वैसा नहीं है. It's
Mm.
quite in depth. It's quite a sort of a detailed process, how you need to sort of, and you need to use your brains in a more strategic manner, I feel, when you're doing these things.
Yeah.
The scale might be smaller, but the impact is very sort of deep, and it goes a long way in terms of how much of revenue you can impact, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the third thing, and maybe the most important thing for a marketer, is the impact on the revenue can be seen in a more sort of direct manner when you're doing B2B marketing. You on B2C also it's there, but B2B it's more direct, because once you do a marketing campaign directed to specific target group, the sell happens to them, and you sort of in touch with them via your sales team or the business development team and all. So I think that's again a very important factor, which can help in building onto your entire marketing piece. So yeah, so because people ask this question, right, marketing is a cost center, it's not a business center. But in this case you can sort of give out the numbers quite obviously, and sort of it's there for everyone to be seen how it is impacted and how it can impact in the long run. Yeah.
Now, yeah, I think a very interesting point which comes out of this is that when B2B marketing is done, I think the leverage is larger. So I think the leverage in general, like when you're doing a B2C marketing, it depends obviously on the product, the price point of the product, but generally B2C marketing is about reaching to more and more people to create awareness and then maximize sales, even if the price point is low. But what you said very correctly, like when you're selling,
Yeah.
I think the idea was of micro insurance, right? That is what you were selling. So when you're selling micro insurance, if you go to every single person and do that, the cost of acquiring a customer would be so high that your product cost will not
Exactly.
be justified. But if you do it through a B2B partner who has a B2C reach already, right? So
Yes.
it kind of becomes a B2B to C, where you kind of get the leverage of the existing
Yeah.
relationship the partner has, and you are able to build a higher value sale in doing a lesser amount of marketing effort. I think that is a point which a lot of people miss about B2B, is that when you're doing an enterprise sale or when you're doing a
Yeah.
sale to a business, you are creating a high ticket value sale. So your marketing effort is both recognized very early, because there is a connect which you make directly, and also you are able to generate a ticket value which can justify the marketing spend when the next cycle comes in. So I think that is a cycle which you need to be prepared for, that if you create a dent, then you will get more budgets. I think budgets, if budgets are more glamorous, I think that could be the case, that if you create the dent first time, then you can create, which comes to a very interesting point, that I think in B2B, is it that your report card is printed faster than in B2C. So people kind of and I think I'm just trying to kind of being the devil's advocate here. I think the B2C marketers generally make creativity a scapegoat and just rely on the communication a lot rather than implementation, where B2B marketers are not able to make that kind of excuse, if I have to put it that way, and they are judged very quickly, and that's why maybe the churn rate in B2B in the initial days of marketing is very high. But once a person kind of gets a grip on it, I think it's a long term investment and a long term match.
I think you
So
put it up
what's your take on that?
and framed it quite beautifully, that they make in creativity the scapegoat, and I'm sort of a culprit of that as well. But what happens with B2B is, and like I just said earlier, your most of your teams, so say a business development team or a sales team, are already in touch with those target groups or those consumers, because they are the ones you're targeting. So the feedback is quite instant, the feedback is quite sort of out there. Feedback is one thing, of course, from a marketing perspective, you need that. But the second thing and the most important thing is from a revenue perspective, where impacts can be seen directly. If an outreach or a marketing sort of communication or a campaign has hit the nerve with the client, the revenue impacts are sort of quite easily measurable and quite easy to see. And Ears are on the ground through the sales team, or even if you're in touch with them, you can sort of improvise on those things constantly on your campaigns or on your whatever communication that you need to do. It's a little more frequent, I would say, a little more direct and a little more frequent. That's another thing. And with regards to budgets, yeah, what happens is, I think most of us, when we get out of B schools or when you step into a marketing career, you all want to sort of drive bigger budgets, crores of monies and whatever. uh, for most of the people, that's not the reality. You need to, and in today's time, especially with how the markets are going and for the past couple of years how things have been, I think a marketer needs to be intelligent. It's not just about spending money, it's not just about blowing the cash that you have. I think maybe those days are gone. Now everyone needs to sort of have a ROI in terms of the work that they are doing. So be it communication, be it the creative part, media of course is impacted there, or even PR that you're doing. So everything is sort of being measured now, and especially when you're working with startups and all, it's sort of you need to prove, or you need to show the value of every dollar or every euro that you spend. So yeah, I mean, the days of being filthy sort of rich as a as a marketer and sort of going all over the town and painting in red hours, I feel it, they're gone. You need to have a better hold of the dollars that you're spending and need to prove every money that sort of goes out. Yeah.
So I think from the starting, I think I've seen that B2B has been very cost efficient in the way they have structured marketing. And I think marketing has become a function which comes in very late in the B2B journey, because it's very product centric in the beginning. And I think one more thing which is very interesting is that media becomes very important in B2C. I think media is a big leverage in B2C, but in B2B it's more about execution, which people as marketers should understand, that the value which a marketer brings in the execution versus marketer just buying a lot of media, right, and relying on the media agency to kind of source a lot of media. I think the value which a marketer can drive in the B2B domain is is act- is gonna really create an impact, and that is purely through strategy, right, purely through
Yeah.
strategy, purely through execution, and not relying a lot on media. Because if you think of it, like most 90% of the marketing spends are taken by media. So if that is out of the equation, and if that's just 10%, so everything else is on strategy.
Uh, I'll sort of agree with you in some parts on that in terms of being more hands on. Yes. I'm sorry. With B2B, you need to be a little more hands on, not little more. You need to be more hands on with what the kind of communication that you're crafting and whatever marketing strategy and everything. With B2C also, I think, Akshay, over a period of time, what has happened is the reliance on media agencies or what the media has sort of, I wouldn't say gone down, but a lot of brands are doing it in-house also now, right? Having their own agencies, having their own media setup for digital specifically. TV you can't do much, but at least for digital. So a lot of brands are doing that. You people are getting more hands on there also. But with B2B, what happens is the media that you do isn't, like you said, the spends aren't much on media maybe, but on other activities. So if you're doing those, and unless you're sort of
Yeah.
outsourcing it to a third party agency, you only need to sort of create all those things in house. So yeah, there has to be a better you need sort of hands on the pulse of the consumer, the kind of what kind of a direction you want to take your entire marketing in the business in, because that is what will eventually drive the numbers for you. So yes, it is more hands on, it is more, you need to get your hands more dirty there. And over a period of time, I think what happens is when you have an understanding of your product, of what kind of campaigns work, what kind of a consumer you sort of are talking to, even if there's some evolution happening there. In a lot of situations or a lot of brands that I've seen, that I've worked with, this thing has been the case where, with B2C and all. But there are a lot of exceptions also, which have sort of come up over a period of time, where where B2B brands are also focusing on reaching out to broader audiences, not just the target groups that they sort of want to have. So, but yeah, I mean, it also depends on the budgets that you have, what kind of reach and what kind of a scale you want to sort of take your brand to. So 100%, but most cases, yes, there is a this big differentiator between how B2C brands are run and how a B2B brand will be run over a period of time. So definitely, yeah.
I saw an article of a B2B brand. I'm not sure of the name now, but I saw an article which said that they bought the 30
Okay,
second commercial on Super Bowl. A B2B brand.
doing it. Salesforce has been out there since a while.
Yeah.
Your TeamViewer has been sort of been reaching out. Infosys, Indian
Yeah.
brands, Infosys, TCS also do a lot of sort of B2C activations in spite of being B2B brands. So no questions about it, because the idea of these brands is to have a larger umbrella sort of association for the users with an Infosys or a TCS and all. So for them it makes sense, but for smaller B2B brands, it's sort of very, very niche. The scale that they also want to reach is limited to. So they have to be very smart when it comes to the kind of marketing that they do. They can't go out and sponsor sports teams or events or whatever. So that becomes a bit
Yeah.
of a challenge there.
Yeah. So now moving on to the fact that what is the process of creating the right buyer persona? Like, how do you kind of look at the right buyer persona, and how much of it is embedded in the sales pitch? Like, how much kind of it links to the sales
Oh,
pitch eventually? So I think there are two parts of the question. One is buyer persona, which is marketing led, and then how does that kind of reflect in the sales team, and how does marketing and sales go come
no, that's
together
that's a
in the
great
B2B
question.
world?
And see, I think the biggest in this situation, what happens is a lot of inputs are coming in from your sales and your business teams, because they are in touch with the client or with those brands or with those customers day to day. So a lot of inputs come in. Where marketing steps in is in defining the kind of in categorizing or segmenting the kind of personas you have. So like I mentioned earlier, when we were selling micro insurance, we knew that there are these five categories, broad categories, which we have. So we slotted the buyer persona in these categories, in these five categories. Once that happened, once we knew who we are sort of targeting, and we don't want to sort of raita phailana nahi hai, we don't want to sort of make it a little more, what kind of a communication would we cater to these audiences? So a person who's running an e-commerce store, or a person who's sort of doing the
Yeah.
comparison websites and all. So how do we, what kind of a communication sort of moves on to there? All this was being done in line with the sales team, because we didn't want any hiccups anywhere, we didn't want
Yeah.
any drop offs to happen, and so on. So we did that, and then once the communication pattern and everything was done, the next one was what kind of outreach we want to sort of look at targeting them, in terms of which mediums
Right.
sort of would fit. Someone is good on LinkedIn, we can do an outreach through white papers or content marketing for the third person, and so on and so forth. So that was the next one. Once these three things were sort of ironed out, what we then moved on to was specific questions about the outreach that we would do. So for example, when you're talking to the sort of sales head of a e-commerce company, communication would appeal to that person, in terms of, if I'm talking about checking out the product at, while at the sort of, when the person when a consumer is browsing the website, do I want my product to come in there, or do I want it to come in at a later stage? So the communication would be sort of derived from there. The second one was from a comparison website. How do I sort of position my product on his website, and so on and so forth. So that was the next step in terms of sort of getting into sort of micro, how do I put it, micro creation of content for those guys on the website, or on my blog, or so on and so forth. So that sort of moved on we moved on to the next step. And once all these things were done, the entire sort of buyer persona was compiled basis these, 5 6 aspects, and then we sort of moved on to execution for it, basically. So what we did was,
Yeah.
for specific users, we'd created white papers. So there were cases which we did with a comparison website here in Europe, and we sort of took that case study, we created a white paper basis that, in terms of how it has impacted us, how it has impacted them, and what kind of ideas we sort of looking to do over a period of time. So, and the thing was, that white paper, we put it on our website, and then you obviously, we sort of pushed it on to different clients who we had. And the third one was from a PR perspective. How do you sort of use it to get PR for you? How do you, because every news item is something which you can sort of drive content from, or drive media from, basically. So that was the third thing which we sort of started looking
Right.
at doing. So these are examples of how you can use smaller wins or smaller things to sort of get a broader scale, and do multiple sort of content pieces from, or
Right.
outreach pieces and everything. So that was something which we sort of started doing. There's another one where we started a blog, basically, which was not targeted to any specific consumer type, but across the board, where you're talking about the product, where you're talking about the brand. So there are a couple of things which we wanted to highlight was, what kind of products we are selling, what kind of a brand we are, right? We want to talk about the brand from a overarching perspective. Third one was from
Yeah.
an employer branding perspective, because that is also important for a small startup of 30 40 people. You want your
Yeah.
when you're recruiting people, these things sort of stand out. So that was another aspect. So yeah, you do a mix and match of things, and sort of try to get out to your consumers in a more broader manner.
Yeah. I think one thing which I understand is like, and a lot of marketers, especially when they're entering into B2B domain, is that either they kind of limit their buyer personas to like one or two, right? Which is not the right thing to do. And the other ones are the extremes who create so many buyer
Yes.
personas that they then are kind of juggling with what is the right content to place in which buyer persona, right? So I think what you said about creating those 5 6 buyer personas and then going after them in execution, I think that is what is the key takeaway from you and to the listeners, that is the approach you should follow. Now just understanding this, now when you said that there are when you create these buyer personas and you start the activities, and the activities are bucketed into multiple spheres, I think like you said, there's a overarching communication which is about the company, which kind of goes through the blogs, and then you create white papers and other things. How much do you think is now the significance of video, or like building a video profile for your brand important? Is like something like a podcast or something like a webinar becoming more and more important as days go
uh,
by?
it very much is, because what is happening is the consumer wants to know a lot of information about the brand in a very short period of time, in a very short span. People's attention spans are reducing, and that is the case in the B2B side of things also.
Yeah.
It's nothing new there. So video becomes a very important aspect, like you pointed out. What we sort of started doing was creating explainer videos about the product, about the brand, in 30 seconds or 60 seconds and all,
Yeah.
making it a little more engaging by sort of going the TikTok way or Instagram way. So this is from product perspective, from a brand perspective. What you were speaking about was more for webinars or podcasts. Yes, that is quite relevant
Yeah.
in today's time, because what I firmly believe is every company is a media house in itself, right? Every company can generate that kind of
Yeah.
content to have a outreach to their consumers and all. So podcast or a webinar sort of become very important in terms of tapping newer users, or engaging with the existing ones.
Yeah.
But again, it depends on what kind of a product you're selling, what kind of outreach you want to do. I mean, uh, there are enough and more
Right.
podcasts these days in the market for every sort of
Yeah.
right, and every
Right.
language: English, German, Hindi, whatever. So you need to sort of find the niche that you want. You can't just go out and say, "Ki, hey, yaar, I have a brand, I want to do a podcast." It won't sort of do the trick for you. Find the niche, find the exact sort of communication that you want to drive week on week or day on day or whatever sort of targeting you're doing from that podcast or something, and then do it.
Yeah.
Webinar also, after a point of time, it becomes it gets a little boring what you're trying to, because while you
Yeah.
want people to come and consume, they don't want to listen to a sermon from the brand, right? So how do you make it engaging? Do you get
Right.
a third party? Do you get a stand-up comedian, for example, to do the entire thing for you, where it's a little more engaging with
Yeah.
the audience? It's a little different. You get someone who's maybe a stand-up guy, and then you get the CEO of the company or the marketing person. And how do you engage the audience with is very important. So those aspects need to be considered. It can't just be a sermon. And yeah, so while it is
Mm.
important, like I said, every company is a media house in itself. You need to keep that in mind, and
Yeah.
you need to catch the right moments where you can sort of push your content and sort of build onto it over a period of time.
Yeah, I think media is being so democratized today. Like ideally the media is now becoming so democratized, and with social media, I think it's so easy to put in your word out. You don't need to be at the mercy of the other media houses to kind of tell about your story, right? Now that is something which is both liberating and both challenging, because liberating because you can do it, but challenging because you need to know the right way of doing it. So I think that is a great opportunity in general. Like if a marketer enters the world and they know the way to kind of communicate the brand message in the B2B space, also in the B2C space and B2B space both, I think that could be a great win for a
I think
marketing career
another thing that I've
going
sort of
forward.
observed over the past couple of years is, how does your CEO or the leader of the company become a thought leader in that space? And that's very relevant for
Yeah.
B2B, because
Yeah.
again, the audience set is small and everything. So the more information that you sort of give out, the way you give it out, information giving to everyone can do, but the way you sort of put it out, what kind of mediums you're using, do you use more LinkedIn, do you have a blog, or do you have a podcast for it? So the entire thought leadership piece, how are you
Right.
grooming your leader? Because that is where a marketer comes, a marketer's sort of strong points can be seen, where you need to, while you are pushing specific things to your c-suite or to your top management, but you need to realize who can speak what,
Yeah.
and how do you use those people to give out the company message in a more strategic manner. And so some media training
Yeah.
for the CEOs or the CXOs level and all is needed, and then you can sort of do all your podcasts or sort of outreach and all of that. So
Yeah.
so that
No, I think how the role of a marketer is evolving is very interesting. So they are now becoming coach. Like they're becoming like they used to be performance coach for CEOs. Now they are
yeah.
marketing coaches, which are there to be hired in the companies. And very very, I think with time the marketing role is gonna become more and more challenging, and ideally it is because it is really a business. When you started, you said that marketing is a cost center. I personally believe marketing is the business driver. I think there are only two things which can drive a business, which is innovation and marketing. Rest all will be all wheels to kind of go through that. But
No,
these are one which are like the engines to make the business work. And I think that
right.
is a perception which needs to be broken now. The perception of marketing being a cost center, because the reality is far away from that. So I think just closing on this note, I think it's a great discussion, Shil, and we should do this more often. Let's connect again. Hopefully, we can discuss some great campaigns when we meet again and have a meaningful. thoughtful
Definitely. Thanks a
discussion.
lot, Akshay, for having me. It was a great session. Yeah, I would love to discuss more and the students about marketing overall. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I've curated a very special digital and B2B marketing course for all of you. This course gives you an idea of what it takes to be a modern marketer in this day and age where things are changing every day and you need to be on top of your game. So, why don't you check out the course from Digit Educator and be a part of it to create a new career in marketing and ace it? Looking forward to seeing you there.